And good morning, Mr. Palmer. I feel like we've done this once already this week, but we're back for another episode of the RUCKCast. And yeah, happy May again. How are you?
I'm doing good. Happy May to you. Once again, you're spilling the secrets that we're not perfect and getting everything done in one take, and we're recording it before we publish. You're letting all the secrets out, John.
Well, I was going to say for the sake of the people that are not in on the joke, which is everybody but us, we did try to record this once. I shouldn't say tried. We did record it once. I say do or do not. There is no try because tomorrow is May the 4th. But so yeah, we had some audio issues, and I just couldn't be cleaned up. So, and in the grand scheme of things, there's a few differences from when we recorded on Monday. So it's actually probably worth getting another crack at it. So. With that said, what have you been doing this week, Jim?
John, I have been focused on Mobility Field Day. So,
and what is Mobility Field Day, Jim?
Gee, John, thank you for asking.
It's like a teaser, right? Not even a
song. Oh goodness, Mobility Field Day is one of the big events on the Wi-Fi calendar throughout the year, because it is. An event is 3 days where presenting sponsors spend generally about 2 hours presenting to a room of delegates, and the presenting sponsors talk about what they have coming up on their roadmaps, what they've been doing, and they sort of present to these industry professionals about what's going on, and there's some feedback, there's questions, and there's sort of this back and forth for like I said, generally about 2 hours, and then they move on to the next presenting sponsors. And the presenting sponsors are just basically vendors within the Wi-Fi space, or now that it's mobility, also like CBRS, or there's tools or other things like that. And last year at Mobility Field Day 7, Ruckus made a comeback to the Mobility Field Day. It had been like 6 or 7 years since we'd done it. And so last year we made a very successful comeback. It was very well received. And so this year we're going to be doing it again. Nice. And it's 2 weeks from today.
Excellent. So I can stop playing dumb, because while I knew we were going to talk about MFD, I'm also well aware of it. For those listening who care, both Jim and I have been delegates at prior Field Day events. And I say events because it's not just Mobility Field Day. This is all covered under an overarching organization known as Gestalt IT. They do a whole bunch of different field days that are all focused on different verticals. I know they've got cloud. I think they've got storage. Security's probably in there too. They've got Network Field Day. They do pop up at various conventions, not conventions, but conventions. Trade shows and things like that, do some stand-up, pop-up kind of things, and they're all over the place. But it's a pretty cool opportunity. I was a delegate a couple years ago, Mobility Field Day 5, as you reminded me on the first iteration of this episode. And you've done a couple of them, I believe.
Yeah.
And so for the benefit of those listening, our couple hundred, depending on who tunes in and downloads, what exactly would I expect? If I jump on, I'm looking to listen to Ruckus at Field Day in a couple weeks, what's that going to be like?
So during the event, and it's all on their webpage, which we'll have a link in the show notes. You jump on the website, and there'll be a live feed, video and audio that you can watch. And there's, like I said, the schedule's up. Ruckus is presenting on May the 18th at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So that'd be 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, New York time. And what happens is you tune into the website, and Tom Hollingsworth, who is the head cat herder for all the delegates, will do a little opening and say, hey, this is who we're going to be talking to next. And he basically turns the microphone over to the presenting sponsors. In this case, it'll be Ruckus at that time. And Ruckus will then spend the next 2 hours going through a range of topics things that we've been working on, things that we are working on currently, and kind of showing what we've been doing and getting feedback and questions from the delegates. And that goes for 2 hours. And if you're just watching online, you do have the opportunity to ask questions by jumping on Twitter and tweeting, at the delegates, using the hashtag MFD9 and stuff like that. And Tom actually kind of covers that at the beginning of the feed. He's like, hey, if you're watching and you have a question, we're going to funnel it through these delegates. So go ahead and tweet at them, and they're watching. And, as you and I both know, there's actually a lot of work for delegates behind the scenes. I remember my time, I spent most of the time typing on the computer because we were, teeing up questions between the delegates. We were watching social media to bring in questions. We were, talking about things that we heard. And so it's a very interactive process from the delegate standpoint. And like I said, if you're watching from home or from work or wherever you're watching from, you can actually join in that conversation and get your questions hopefully potentially answered live on the air.
Yeah, it's a before I did it, I was like, oh, that looks like it would be really fun. It looks like it would be really cool. And of course, all of what I was looking at was MFD pre-COVID. Because they fly all the delegates out to the Silicon Valley area, and typically, and I know they've I can't remember the guy's name because I didn't get to meet him. They've got a limo bus that they rent, and it's usually the same guy, the same company, and he's like a part of the family, and they drive up and down whatever highways and byways to get to the different headquarters and facilities, and a lot of camaraderie. It sounded really awesome. A lot of rubbing shoulders with your fellow delegates and the companies that you are there to hear about, or hear from, rather. But it's harrowing because, first of all, it's all recorded, it's all streamed live, and delegates are responsible to ask questions, and they're supposed to be smart questions. And the imposter syndrome was off the charts. But it got worse for me because I was the first, and I think it was one of the first ones they did. It might have even been the first one they did that was virtual. During COVID, it was like, I want to say it was like June or July of the lockdowns. All virtual. Everybody was set up at home on camera. So, we're all on the Slack. We're all talking questions. I'm trying to think of my own questions. People are feeding me questions from Twitter. Every delegate typically has a couple chunks of time where, like, and Tom will tell you, like, hey, go ask questions and stuff like that. And go ask questions. But on top of that, delegates, one of the expectations, because all of these people are, and we've seen the list of at least, I think, 9 or 10 of them so far, pretty much most of them are known in the wireless and tech communities. Call them influencers if you want. They've got a following. They've got a decent amount of Twitter followers. They put blogs out and podcasts and videos and whatnot. But that's the other expectation. So you're sitting there trying to ask questions and to learn and pay attention to the sessions. But you also have to take notes because you're expected to write about these and talk about these after the fact. So it's a lot of work. It even virtual, it was fun. I'm sure it's a lot more fun in person, but virtual was fine. But it's a crazy experience. But for getting back to, I think last year they were finally back in person. That's exciting. Getting us back there was exciting last year. But there's another hook, right? Because I think somebody that we know is going to actually be there.
So it's interesting that you talk about being back in person, because it's still not fully back to in person, and it's not back to the way that it was when I did it back in the pre times, because instead of going from company headquarters to company headquarters to company headquarters, which was very interesting. It's now all at one place, and instead of the delegates going from location to location, it's now the companies that rotate in. And believe it or not all of the delegates are actually in the room. They still are doing some hybrid. And like last year, when Ruckus presented, Christopher Muhammad, who's been a guest on the podcast a couple of times now, he actually presented from his house. and in up in Canada. And so sometimes you'll have this, now you have this hybrid where you'll have some delegates in the room, some are remote, some presenters are in the room, and some are remote. And for this year, for the first time, I'm actually going to switch from this side, different side of the table. I'm going to go from being a delegate. I'm now actually going to present at Mobility Field Day. And I'm not going to tell people what I'm presenting at or what I'm talking about, because I want you to tune in and watch and, ask me questions. I'd love to hear questions from people, saying, hey, what about this? And what about that? And some of the things I will tell you right now, I won't be able to answer, which is part of the fun, because, when you have these industry, luminaries, sorry. When you have these industry luminaries, they know pretty much where the technology is going just as much as we do. A lot of these guys have, they work with some of the vendors while they're not employed by the vendor. They have some additional insider information that most your average person doesn't have. Looking at the list, I would say there's probably 4 or 5 people that have NDAs signed with at least one vendor, so they have some inside information, so they know where the industry is going. But at the same time, that also helps us, because we can listen to their questions and we can get an idea of, hey, what's happening elsewhere. And as we've discussed as a team internally, it's one of those things where we know that, our competitors are listening to us. And so that makes it, that's another little wrinkle is, if you say too much, if you reveal too much, so you end up trying to walk this fine line. And so if you tune into Mobility Field Day for the first time, you're going to, whether it's us or one of the other, presenting sponsors, you're going to see people who are kind of like tiptoeing around things, and they'll hem and they'll haw, and they'll be like, let's talk off camera. Let's do this, or that's not something I can talk about at this time, and stuff like that. So expect to hear some of that, because again, the delegates that they bring in are really, not counting you and me, are very, are really sharp. They know, they already sort of know this stuff, because they worked in the industry long enough. They know the trends, they know where things are going. They see the requests coming in from their customers, from, sometimes they are the customer. Our buddy John Kilpatrick is going to be a delegate, and he works for, he's a customer. He works for the end user. And so, they know where things are going, because they're the ones that are driving these requests. They're the ones that are saying, hey, I need a network that can support my use case. And John has some really kind of interesting use cases that I love to talk to him about, because it is just so much different than what you normally see. So you get that different perspective, and that's why they bring in people like John.
Sure. I mean, I had a couple thoughts while we were talking. So first of all, you mentioned that you're not going to share what you're talking about. And I know what you're talking about. So I can guarantee people it is not a sequel to the gas-powered AP. It was at WLPC a couple years ago, knows where that comes from. And there will be no, as far as I can understand, no hand-waving Canadian magic, unfortunately. And if any,
well, not for me.
Well, I'm not presenting, so there won't be for me, and I don't think SEMO is going to do that. Going back to the more serious side of it, what it kind of is, and you mentioned, obviously there's NDAs in play, and no vendor is going to sit there and give away the secret sauce. Especially when it's being recorded and eventually is going to be, it's being streamed. It's eventually going to hit YouTube, and you've got, probably a couple hundred eyeballs at any given time looking at the streams. But effectively, it's allows the vendors pay at the end of the day. Everybody, if you don't know, the vendors pay for the slots. This is not like, hey, do you want to talk? It's, hey, do you want to talk? If you want, here's the price for the slot. You're paying to bring the delegates in to listen to your pitch, but it's not a sales pitch. This is not at all, the elevator spiel to get time with the CEO to buy the product. This is, maybe there's a little bit of marketing polish to it, but this is a technical, almost a borderline deep dive. Like, this is what I would say as an SE, I would go talk to a customer and get a little bit more under the hood. This is not a deep dive that you would do like a 4-hour, morning session really get into the weeds with some of the stuff because there's just not enough time. But it's far more technical than sales, which I think is lost on some people sometimes. But it's nice as a delegate, and it's nicer as somebody that's just watching them all, especially because I used to be in that customer seat, right? I knew one vendor because that's all we were using. But an event like Field Day is an awesome experience an opportunity rather, to see other vendors, how they do things, and say, okay, well, maybe I don't want to switch vendors, but can we do what they do, but with this? But it's also forgetting the vendors, even though we love our vendor because, we are a vendor. But there's other presenters, right? So I know Salona, you've had CBRS things in the past. It's gone a little bit more, like you said, mobility. And there's also been NetAlly they used it as a sort of a rebirth event a couple of years ago. They kind of rebranded to NetAlly, and they've been pretty consistently bringing out some pretty cool, tools and updates and things like that. And I believe they're presenting again. So, that's worth watching. But it's a nice event. And like you said, we've got a couple. You probably know more about it than I do, but I think we've got, probably, if I had to guess in a 2-hour slot, we've probably got 2 or 3 different angles that we're going to take to present to the delegates. So it's, I'm not going to lie, even if you weren't presenting, it's pretty exciting.
You mentioned the marketing part, and there is marketing. Let's be honest. I mean, as much as we are anti-marketing, and and it kind of makes us cringe a little bit sometimes when
we're anti-marketing, but you're marketing, Jim, right?
No, I'm marketing adjacent, apparently. I don't know, but the thing is you need marketing. You need marketing, right? And I'll point to what happened last year, and maybe we should put the link to last year's session in the show notes so you can go look at that as well. Last year we did a section on IoT, and it's one of those things where it's like, okay, all the Wi-Fi vendors have IoT in their APs. And the question that everybody always has after that was, well, great, what do you do with that? What do you do with having IoT? And we did podcasts about IoT, right? We go back and listen to that episode. But that was something that we talked about last year at Field Day. That was an eye-opening experience because it was a marketing thing of saying, hey, everybody, guess what we have that you don't know about, which is what marketing really is, right? Hey, we have this thing that you don't know about. Let us tell you about it. That's marketing. But it wasn't a marketing sales pitch. It was simply, hey, we have this IoT solution using the Ruckus IoT controller and the IoT Insights dashboard that you can now take these IoT radios in your APs and you can actually do something with them. And there's several of the delegates who are IoT practitioners, quote unquote practitioners, and they didn't know that we had this. And so being able to do that, but it's a marketing, but it's not a sales pitch because it's a technical pitch of we have IoT and this is what we can do with it. And that's what makes it interesting is it has that marketing, but it's more technical.
Yeah, and I think that's key. Just looking at it from so many other conversations, and this is not a Tech Field Day specific thing. There's often times where and we've both had it as customers as well, where there's a disconnect where this side, and I'm using hand gestures on the podcast. This side says we're going to build this to do that, and the other side's going, we never asked for this, and I'm raising my hand off camera, so it's even better. But the other side says we didn't ask for this, and then things kind of get forgotten, or they don't talk. And this is an opportunity, and this is great for us as a vendor participating in Field Day, because you're getting those 12 or so delegates, plus Tom and anybody else from Gestalt that happens to be lingering. You get those people in that conference room. They're a captive audience for 2 hours. No disrespect to anybody on Twitter, but forget about the people that are watching the stream, because you're getting those delegates before and after the stream is on too. Like there's those side conversations, but you're getting the feedback from some people are customers in that room. Some people in that room in 2 weeks will be Ruckus customers already. And some of those people have never had the chance to see Ruckus in action, or maybe have a misconception. And now you're getting 2 hours where they get to hear our story, they get to see our tech, but we get to hear them offer feedback of like, hey, have you thought about using it this way? Have you thought about that use case? And there might be some things that we can't accommodate based on how things are designed. It happens. Every vendor has limitations based on architecture. But a lot more, especially, and you mentioned IoT, a lot of those things people have asked us about, and IoT is a big one. Like, hey, could you guys do that? And we're like, yeah, we've been doing that for a couple of years. So it's an awesome opportunity for us to amplify that message and or improve upon it. Because I think, we'll harp on IoT because there are so many people, customers, that have had our gear for years that forget that we've got IoT radios built in and that we've had an IoT suite to support it for, I've been here 2+ years and it's been here longer than I have been. And they're just like, wait a minute, I don't have to buy any more kit to do this other than the vRiot server and IoT Insights probably. But like, it's an opportunity to really shine a nice bright spotlight to a group of really smart people. And ultimately the feedback too is really, really valuable. So.
Yeah, I remember when I did Mobility Field Day 3, one of the things I found interesting is when we would go to the corporate headquarters. I remember one presenting company, they had 3 times the number of people in the back of the room, all of them with notepads and paper, pens, and they were furiously taking notes. If we said something out loud, these guys were writing it down, and even though it's recorded, and it was like, okay, we need to know more because this is what is pertinent from the field today. There's no, we don't have to go do a study group. We don't have to do anything else. These are people that are actually coming in and saying, okay, this is cool and great that you can do all of this, but here's the use case that I need or that I see being requested multiple times. Can you solve this problem for me and my customers, depending on whether they're they might be the customer. So it's like, hey, I just need you to solve this problem. And so it is that time to sort of have that live feedback of what you've done and where you need to go. And so it's a very challenging time for the presenters and the delegates. But it's also a really good time. It's one of those things where you get done. I remember, you'd get done and you'd just be like, oh, and you just be sort of like, you're just spent. You're just done. But then like you get to the next one and you'd start up again and you're like, okay, time to go. And then of course from my experiences, I got home after my 3 days and then I'd sleep for a week, trying to catch up from everything. But it's one of those good tiring times. And so I'm looking forward to presenting at Tech Field Day, Mobility Field Day for the first time. And, hopefully being able to catch up with some of my friends who are delegates. So, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't, I don't envy you from the presentation part of it because anybody that wants to see my presentation skills about how I feel about talking in front of a few hundred smart people, don't look at YouTube from February. I promise you won't want to waste your time. I don't mind teaching classes. I'm fine with that. That worked out pretty well. But I don't envy you getting in front of the room. My hat's off to you for that. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's an awesome opportunity for you and for us. It should be a good time. It came up quick. Like I said, I think when I did it, I felt like I've always had like July etched in my head, and I think I'm sure it was probably pandemic related planning and logistics and whatnot that it just was later. But this goes back to when we talked on Monday and tried to record this the first time. I looked at it before we recorded, and I was like, "Holy cow! It's 2 weeks away." It's sneaking up pretty quick, and I'm hoping your presentation's ready. I'm smiling and laughing because I know this is something that you were just working on. So I know it's a work in progress.
My presentation is nowhere near ready, and that's the thing with my stuff. It's funny. They said, they came to me and they said, hey, we would really like you to present because you're Mr. WLPC. I've given a keynote at WLPC, which I think went okay. It's still terrifying. I'm able to hide the terror more because I've done it more. So you don't get better at presenting. You get better at hiding the fear is how that really works out. And so, they came to me and they said, we would really like you to present. And I went, yeah, because I'm looking at the list of delegates and I'm like, okay, I know for certain that right now there's 10 delegates listed. 8 of the 10 were at WLPC and heard me present for an hour. So, I can go do that, and I'm not getting the full 2 hours. I'm not getting an hour. So it's like, oh, I don't have to present as long, and there's only 10 of them. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it should be a good time, and I really hope that people tune in and watch and really participate, because there is that avenue of participation, where you can hopefully, if you have a good question, it will be asked, and hopefully we can get you a good answer.
Yeah, it'll be a good. I mean, it'll go quick. I mean, the next couple of weeks while you're prepping and all that are going to go quickly, but at 2 hours, especially broken up over just a couple 20-minute sessions, it'll go fast. And as I learned as a delegate, I'm sure you learned this too, like, the delegates aren't told to sit there and listen. They're told, like, and this is a lesson that's important, and a vendor doesn't appreciate that until they've either presented or they've hired somebody that was a delegate, which happens more often than you think. And I guarantee there's going to be somebody. Well, I'm not going to guarantee because I don't know I have no firsthand information, but it's not unsurprising. I mean, I was a delegate, and less than a year later, I was on the vendor side of things. The field day before me, same thing happened. But once you have a delegate in your midst, they can tell you, like, the delegates are told, ask questions and don't let them stick to the script. Like, and it's not to be mean and it's not to be rude. It's the idea is this is the technical part of it. We want to make sure that we're asking the probing questions that they can go off script, and answer the questions. And I think that's why you see, and there have been a few of them in recent memory that were really, really well done, that were live, like legitimately live demos. And I think one or two that might have been like recorded only because it was such an involved demo that it was not like, as far as we could tell, it wasn't smoke and mirrors, but it just, for the sake of execution, it had to be a little bit more, I don't want to call it orchestrated, but demos are key because at that point they can actually see the tech working. But yeah, delegates are definitely going to try and throw you off your game. So that's.
But they're not. The goal isn't to throw you off your game. The goal is to challenge. The goal is to ask good questions, because at the end of the day, if we don't get any feedback, if we don't get anything, that's coming back and saying, this is not the best decision, or this is why we disagree with what you're saying. It's a whole thing. You learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. And so that's really kind of what it is, hey, let's challenge the companies. Let's bring good technical questions. Let's talk tech, and let's, have this dialogue back and forth. And sometimes, I remember one of the vendors, basically, there was a question that came in and he said, hey, well, what if I wanted to do X with your product? And the product developer looked at him and said, then my answer is no, because that's not what it was designed to do. And that's a fair answer. And so it's an interesting experience. You can really learn a lot, not only about the presenting sponsors, but where the technology and where technology in general is headed. So I encourage everybody to tune in. Like I said, we'll have the links in the show notes, and whether or not it goes great or it's a flaming train wreck, it's going to happen in 2 weeks, and it's going to be an experience. So hopefully we'll see everybody there virtually.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, you won't see us, but we'll see you.
Yeah.
See some of us. I mean, I don't know if any of the delegates listen, but they'll see you.
I might even shave.
I would recommend that. I mean, maybe, I don't know,
It's me. You never know.
Throw some cologne on, it'll be fine. Axe body spray. You'll be fine. All right. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything else. I don't know, Jim.
Nope.
Yep. So
like I said, we'll have all the links in the show notes. So, and then mark your calendars. There'll be others that you can go watch, but you definitely need to come and watch us. Thursday, May 18th, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, which makes it 3:30 p.m. Central and 2:30 p.m. Mountain. And if you're outside the U.S., I'm sorry, you're on your own.
Say you're not prepared. You got to have all the time zone charts so you can go through. That's just, come on, man.
Well, I can just keep counting up. Right, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30. You just got to figure out which number works for you.
It'll be at 5 o'clock somewhere.
5 o'clock somewhere. Yes.
Well, on that note, I think we'll hit the music and say goodnight, or goodbye. Good night. It's the morning. Man, we got goofy real quick, or I did, anyways. But so yeah, we'll say see you next episode, and yeah, next time we'll record. We'll still be. Yeah, you won't have presented yet, but
Nope.
something else. But we'll definitely have to do a recap, at least for a little bit, on a future episode to see how your experience with it went.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got nothing else. So, Mr. Palmer, thank you once again.
Thank you, John.
I'll see you on the next episode.
See ya.